Have you ever added fresh tomatoes to your meal thinking you were doing something good for your heart, only to wonder later why your body feels more tired, your heartbeat slightly irregular, or your night suddenly interrupted by repeated trips to the bathroom? It may sound surprising, but for many adults over the age of 61, of the foods most widely praised as healthy can quietly become a hidden stress on the kidneys when it's used the wrong way. And the most troubling part is that almost no one talks about it. I've seen patients who believed they were protecting their health with the right foods, only to discover that a simple daily habit, something as innocent as how they use tomatoes in their diet, was slowly pushing their kidneys and heart toward dangerous imbalance. Now, please understand the problem is not the tomato itself. Tomatoes contain valuable nutrients and powerful antioxidants. But when the body begins to age and the kidneys no longer filter minerals as efficiently as they once did, the way we combine and prepare certain foods can suddenly matter far more than we ever imagined. What once helped the body in our 30s may quietly overwhelm it in our 60s. My name is Dr. Mark Ellis, and for more than 2 decades, I've worked with patients struggling with kidney and metabolic health. Over the years, I've noticed a pattern that repeats itself again and again. Small dietary habits repeated every day, slowly creating stress inside organs that rarely show symptoms until the damage is already advanced. In the next few minutes, I want to walk you through something most people have never been told. 3 common ways tomatoes are combined with everyday foods that may put aging kidneys under serious strain, especially for those over 60. More importantly, I'll also show you how a few simple changes in how tomatoes are prepared can transform them from a potential burden into a food that actually supports your heart, your circulation, and your long-term health. And before we go any further, there is one crucial fact about your kidneys that every adult should understand, because once you hear it, you may never look at your daily meals the same way again. Tomatoes are often seen as one of the healthiest foods you can put on your plate. They're bright fresh, full of vitamins, and widely recommended in heart-healthy diets. Many people, especially after the age of 60, start adding more tomatoes to their meals because they believe it will naturally strengthen their health. And in many ways, that instinct is understandable. Tomatoes do contain powerful antioxidants and beneficial nutrients that the body needs. But what most people are rarely told is that the way our bodies process certain nutrients changes as we grow older. And this is particularly true when it comes to the kidneys. Your kidneys act as the body's filtration system. Every single day, these 2 small organs quietly filter waste balance fluids and regulate minerals like sodium and potassium in the bloodstream. When we are young, the kidneys are extremely efficient. They can handle fluctuations in diet without much difficulty. But starting around the age of 40, kidney filtration slowly begins to decline as part of the natural aging process. By the time someone reaches their 60s, the glomerular filtration rate, the measurement doctors use to assess kidney function, may already be significantly lower than it once was. This decline doesn't mean the kidneys are failing. It simply means they have less reserve capacity than before. Because of that, minerals that were once easily balanced by the body may begin to accumulate more easily. One of those minerals is potassium. Tomatoes naturally contain a meaningful amount of potassium, which is normally beneficial for regulating blood pressure and supporting heart function. However, when kidney function is reduced, the body may struggle to remove excess potassium efficiently. If potassium builds up in the bloodstream, it can disrupt the electrical signals that control the heartbeat, potentially leading to fatigue, irregular heart rhythms, or other symptoms that people often mistake as simple aging. The important thing to understand is that tomatoes themselves are not the enemy. The real issue is how frequently they are consumed and what they are combined with. As the body ages, the same foods that once supported health may need to be used more thoughtfully. But understanding how aging kidneys process potassium is only the first piece of the puzzle, because there is another everyday habit far more common that can quietly increase the strain on the kidneys without most people ever realizing it. Once we understand how aging kidneys handle potassium differently, the next thing to look at is not just what we eat, but how we combine foods in the same meal. And one of the most common combinations that quietly increases pressure on the kidneys happens in a meal that many people eat almost every day. A sandwich with tomatoes and processed meat. It seems harmless. In fact, many people believe adding fresh tomato slices to a sandwich actually makes it healthier. A slice of bread, a bit of ham or sausage, and a few tomatoes for freshness, it looks balanced and convenient. But inside the body, that simple combination can create a surprisingly heavy workload for aging kidneys. Here's why. Tomatoes naturally contain potassium, a mineral that the kidneys must carefully regulate. Processed meats such as deli ham, bacon sausages, and smoked meats, on the other hand, often contain large amounts of sodium and inorganic phosphorus additives. These additives are widely used in the food industry to improve texture and extend shelf life. The problem is that inorganic phosphorus is absorbed by the body extremely efficiently, sometimes up to 90% absorption, much higher than the phosphorus found naturally in whole foods like beans or nuts. So when tomatoes and processed meats are eaten together, the kidneys suddenly have to deal with two mineral loads at the same time: potassium from the tomatoes and phosphorus plus sodium from the processed meat. For younger kidneys, this might not cause an immediate problem, but for someone over 60 whose filtration capacity may already be reduced, this combination can act like putting extra weight on an already aging filtration system. Over time, excess phosphorus in the bloodstream has been linked to vascular calcification, a process where calcium begins to deposit in blood vessel walls. This makes arteries stiffer and increases cardiovascular risk. Meanwhile, elevated potassium levels can affect the electrical activity of the heart. I once spoke with a patient in his late 60s who loved making breakfast sandwiches every morning. He would toast bread, add smoked sausage, and top it with several slices of tomato because he believed the tomatoes made the meal healthier. Months later, routine blood work showed rising phosphorus levels and early signs of kidney strain. He was shocked. He thought he was making a good dietary choice. But the real issue wasn't the tomato alone. It was the combination and repetition of that same meal every single day. And that's the key lesson here. Sometimes the foods that appear healthy on the surface can interact in ways that place hidden stress on the body. But even this combination isn't the most common mistake people make with tomatoes. In fact, the next habit is even more widespread and far more deceptive because many people associate it with comfort and sweetness rather than risk. But simply understanding this food pairing isn't enough, because there is another factor that can quietly damage the tiny blood vessels inside the kidneys themselves. After hearing about the risks of combining tomatoes with processed meats, many people assume the next mistake must involve fast food or heavily processed snacks. But the truth is far more surprising. One of the most common habits that may quietly harm kidney health is something that feels completely harmless, even comforting. It's the simple act of adding sugar to fresh tomatoes. In many households, this combination is familiar. A plate of ripe tomato slices with a small sprinkle of white sugar can taste refreshing, slightly sweet, and easy to eat. For older adults whose sense of taste may not be as sharp as it once was, that touch of sweetness can make the fruit much more enjoyable. But inside the body, refined sugar behaves very differently than many people expect. When sugar enters the bloodstream quickly, it causes blood glucose levels to rise sharply. In response, the body releases insulin to help move that sugar into the cells. Occasional spikes are normal and manageable. However, when this pattern happens repeatedly over time, the body begins producing compounds known as advanced glycation, end products or AGEs. These molecules form when excess sugar attaches to proteins in the blood and tissues. Over time, AGEs accumulate and begin to damage delicate structures inside the body, especially the smallest blood vessels. This becomes particularly important for the kidneys. Each kidney contains nearly 1 million microscopic filtration units called glomeruli. These tiny filters are made of extremely thin capillaries designed to separate waste from essential nutrients. Because these structures are so delicate, they are highly sensitive to metabolic stress. When AGEs build up in the bloodstream, they can attach to the walls of these tiny vessels, causing them to thicken and lose flexibility. As circulation slows and inflammation increases, the filtration barrier begins to weaken. One of the earliest signs of this process is the leakage of small amounts of protein into the urine, an early indicator of kidney stress. I once met a patient in her early 70s who had proudly eliminated desserts from her diet to protect her health. Instead of cakes or cookies, she would prepare a bowl of sliced tomatoes every afternoon and sprinkle a little sugar on top. In her mind, this felt like a healthier alternative. Months later, routine tests revealed rising blood sugar levels and early signs of kidney microvascular stress. The surprising part was that she never considered her habit a sugar problem. After all, she wasn't eating candy. But from the body's perspective, refined sugar triggers the same metabolic response regardless of where it's added. Now, this doesn't mean people must completely avoid sweetness. Moderation and balance still matter. Eating tomatoes in their natural form or pairing them with fiber and protein can help stabilize blood sugar and protect those fragile kidney vessels. However, even this explanation doesn't reveal the most serious risk associated with tomatoes. Because there is another extremely common habit, one that many people believe is healthy, that can push potassium levels dangerously high, especially for individuals already taking certain medications. And that next factor may be the most important one of all. But simply understanding the effect of sugar on kidney blood vessels still isn't enough, because there is another combination that can directly disturb the heart's rhythm itself. The final and most dangerous mistake involving tomatoes is one that many people never suspect, because it often appears in the form of a healthy habit. In fact, millions of adults start their day with it, believing they are doing something good for their heart and immune system. I'm talking about drinking tomato juice or tomato smoothies while taking blood pressure medication. For many people over 60, managing blood pressure becomes part of daily life. Doctors commonly prescribe medications from a group known as ACE inhibitors, or ARBs, such as enalapril, lisinopril, or losartan. These medications are extremely valuable because they help relax blood vessels, reduce blood pressure, and protect the heart from long-term damage. However, these medications also have an important side effect that most patients are never told about in detail. They reduce the kidney's ability to excrete potassium. Under normal conditions, the kidneys carefully regulate potassium levels in the blood. But when someone is taking ACE inhibitors, or ARBs, potassium tends to remain in the bloodstream longer than usual. For younger kidneys, this may not create immediate problems. Yet in older adults whose kidney filtration has already declined, the margin of safety becomes much smaller. Now consider what happens when tomato juice enters the picture. A single medium tomato contains roughly 250 to 300 milligrams of potassium. When tomatoes are blended into juice, people often use 3 or 4 at once, which can quickly push the potassium content close to 900 or even 1,000 milligrams in a single drink. If the kidneys are already holding on to potassium because of medication, that sudden intake can cause levels in the bloodstream to climb more quickly than the body can safely manage. In medical terms, this condition is called hyperkalemia, elevated potassium in the blood. When potassium rises too high, it begins interfering with the electrical system that controls the heartbeat. Early symptoms can include muscle weakness, fatigue, tingling sensations, or an irregular pulse. In more severe cases, dangerously abnormal heart rhythms can develop. I once treated a retired teacher in his late 60s who had recently begun drinking a large glass of tomato juice every morning because he had read that it was good for heart health. At the same time, he was faithfully taking his prescribed blood pressure medication. After several weeks, he started experiencing unusual fatigue and episodes where his heart felt as if it were skipping beats. When we checked his blood work, his potassium level had risen above the safe range. He was shocked because in his mind, tomato juice was a natural health drink. What he didn't realize was that the combination of medication and high potassium foods had quietly created a dangerous imbalance. This doesn't mean people taking blood pressure medication must completely avoid tomatoes, but it does mean that moderation, medical guidance, and awareness are essential, especially when tomatoes are consumed in concentrated forms like juices or smoothies. And this is the deeper lesson behind everything we've discussed today. Foods that are healthy in one context can behave very differently when combined with medications or when the body itself has changed with age. Understanding these interactions gives us the power to make smarter choices that protect the kidneys instead of unknowingly overloading them. Before we end today, I want to leave you with an important reminder. Your kidneys are incredibly loyal organs. They work quietly every single day, filtering your blood-balancing minerals and protecting the internal stability of your entire body. Most of the time, they do this without pain, without noise, and without asking for attention. That's why caring for kidney health isn't about waiting until symptoms appear. It's about making small, thoughtful choices long before problems begin. Simple habits like being mindful of high potassium foods, avoiding excessive processed meats, limiting added sugar, and speaking with your doctor if you take blood pressure medication can make a real difference in protecting your kidneys as you age. If you found this information helpful, I encourage you to save this video so you can return to it later or share it with a friend or family member who might benefit from it. Kidney problems often develop quietly, and sometimes one piece of knowledge at the right time can help someone avoid years of difficult treatment later. And if you'd like to continue learning practical research-based tips to protect your kidneys and overall health, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Here we regularly share new medical insights, simple lifestyle strategies, and evidence-based guidance to help you care for your kidneys and stay healthy as the years go by. Most importantly, remember this: growing older does not mean losing control of your health. With the right knowledge, balanced habits, and consistent care, many people maintain strong kidney function and active lives well into their later years. Take care of your body, stay curious about your health, and never underestimate how powerful small daily choices can be in shaping a healthier future.